Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this academic ceremony in which Professor Dr. Nancy Bocken will inaugurate her professorship in sustainable business at Maastricht University School of Business and Economics. We recruited Professor Bocken for our Maastricht Sustainability Institute already more than 2 years ago. In that sense, this inaugural is a bit late, but good. There were reasons for that. We recruited her from a position as professor in sustainable business practice and management at the International Institute for Industrial and Environmental Economics at the University of London, Sweden, in strong competition with other universities of the Netherlands that also wanted her. At the end, we prevailed. Of course, her impressive CV meant that there was a real battle to get her, but we prevailed. And I'm very happy with that. It's indeed clear that Professor Bocken already has at this point in time, cooperation across faculties and within the Brightlands campuses, so she's very quickly become a member of the Maastricht University community. And indeed, from day one, Nancy has contributed to innovation of both education and research. She has, for example, been spearheading the establishment of a joint master program with the University of York on sustainable business, leadership, innovation, and management, or SUBLIM, nothing less could do, for short. In that program, and through education of our students, this particular master program aims at creating change agents for a more sustainable world. And the fact that Nancy is in the lead for this program is perhaps symptomatic for her own ambitions to have a positive impact on the world. Other than education, Professor Bocken's positive impact also materializes in quite obvious ways through her research. Her most cited publication is entitled The Circular Economy, a New Sustainability Paradigm, and it was published only 5 years ago in the Journal of Cleaner Production. This is joint work with Martin Geisdorfer, Paulo Savache, and Erik Jan Hültink. In this very important article, they argue that the similarities and differences between circular economy at one side and sustainability at the other are ambiguous. Because of this, the use of these important concepts I got lost here. Because of this, the use of these important concepts in research means that the research has less impact. The article addresses this gap in our understanding and provides a conceptual clarity by defining them well and by analyzing the relationships between circularity and sustainability. I found this extremely useful. And useful perhaps also for the inaugural today is their clear definitions of circularity and sustainability. By the way, also a clear focus areas for Maastricht University's new strategy. And I quote, "We define," that's Nancy and her co-authors, "we define the circular economy as a regenerative system in which resource input and waste, emission and energy leakage are minimized by slowing, closing and narrowing material and energy loops. This can be achieved through long-lasting design, maintenance, repair, reuse, manufacturing, refurbishing and recycling. Second, we define sustainability as the balanced integration of economic performance, social inclusiveness, and environmental resilience to the benefit of current and future generations," unquote. This is really, really useful. The article also argues that circularity's relationship with sustainability is not a unique mapping, but that circularity is sometimes seen as a condition for sustainability, sometimes seen as a beneficial relation, or even sometimes as a trade-off in literature. This can be broken down into 8 different relationships. The non-uniqueness of this mapping is then seen as necessary to capture the diversity and complementarity of the two concepts and allow business people and policymakers to maneuver in the space between sustainability and circularity. Nancy has received a very highly prestigious grant from the European Research Council. Project Circular X is about experimentation with circular service business models. Circular X started on the 1st of June 2020 and will run for 5 years. The aim is to facilitate a diverse range of organizations with the implementation of the circular economy. And the project closely collaborates with all kinds of organizations, from small startups to large multinationals. And these are organizations who want to innovate towards the circular economy. I suspect that we'll hear more about Circular X and circular service business models in the inaugural speech. So I will refrain from giving my rendition now and basically just emphasize that it is impressive and hugely important. Before I give the word to Professor Bocken, let me give the word to the director of Maastricht Sustainability Institute, Professor Dr. Frank Bruns. Of course, he should have been here, but for more than a week he has been suffering from COVID-19. Here is what he says, and I quote, "Dear Nancy, it would have been an honor to have done my inaugural with you. Unfortunately, Corona threw a spanner in the wheels. It does allow me to ask Peter to say a welcome from me as director of MSI. You have been around for some time already, and we are very happy with you being a member of our institute. That's not only because of the important research agenda that you are actively pursuing, it's also because of the way you act as a role model for young academics and your development of ideas for new educational programs that fit well with MSI, SBE, and the university-wide initiatives to develop sustainability. I very much look forward to continue to work with you on these activities, and I'm sure others within MSI as well. Welcome." Unquote. It is now a great pleasure for me to give the word to the main attraction of today, Professor Dr. Nancy Bocken, with her inaugural lecture intriguingly entitled Towards Circularity and Beyond. Exploring the future of sustainable business through experimentation. Professor Bocken, the word is yours.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very kind words. So it's very nice to start a presentation like that with such a long introduction, and actually already an introduction to what I'm doing. So it's very good that you read everything so carefully. Thank you also friends, family, and also colleagues for being here, colleagues from close and far away. It's very nice that you support me today in this journey. Thank you also to the team at Maastricht Sustainability Institute, and also specifically also Circular X for working on this research agenda together with me. I really appreciate you being here today. And thank you also for the new collaborators on projects like Prosperity, on new sustainable business models, and also the sustainability of those, together with RISE Sweden. Also a new project actually on circular wind turbine blades with TU Delft, and also the RAC Pro project on urban upcycling with the Hogeschool van Amsterdam. Thank you for all those nice collaborations. Thank you also for the local collaborations in Limburg. Actually, there's a new Circular Economy Limburg initiative, and it's really encouraging to see also from the Circular Economy jury I was part of that there's so many innovations already happening in the region. I'm very proud to be a Limburger as well. Thank you also to those more generally interested in this topic, listening in also virtually. Very nice to have you here, and apologies for not thanking you personally by name. Thank you also for former universities I was part of, were already mentioned in the Netherlands, UK, US, and Finland and Sweden. Thank you for some of you for seeing you here again today. I learned a lot also from these other places, and it also helped me establish this new professorship here in sustainable business. Thank you also for my alma mater, Maastricht University, for welcoming me back here at this institute. Very warm welcome, and also very good to see this focus on sustainability. I highly appreciate it, and I'm very happy to contribute also to this research agenda. And finally, my colleague Frank, I really miss you here today. It would have been great to do this together. It would have been a formal, a double inauguration, but I hope you recover from COVID soon, and that we can all attend your inauguration as well. Now over to the official part. So these were the thank yous. I think I also forgot to thank Thijs specifically as well for also being supportive until the last moment, next to the friends and family being here. So thank you all for being here today. So the official part, the content, towards circularity and beyond, exploring the future of sustainable business through experimentation. So not talking only about circularity, but also what might be beyond that. So I like simple structures, so simple things that can help people understand, hopefully, a complex topic. So I have 3 themes here today. So I start with the problem, then the solution, and also the reality, actually, that is in that solution, and also the future. So first of all, the problem. And the picture already says that the world is quite wasteful. So basically, we want infinite growth, and what I mean with we is business as usual, mainstream business, but also politicians. But we actually live in a world with finite resources, so this is quite problematic. So what we see, for example, is that everything is going up since the 1950s, from population growth, of course, but also the stuff that we actually need. From the mobile phones or phones in the past to the number of McDonald's restaurants popping up, everything is continuously going up, and we expect this to be normal. But of course, this isn't normal, because what we also see is that atmospheric CO2 is on the rise. We see things like floods going up, we see rainforest losses, but also, very big species extinction also since this massive growth. So we need to change. So what is basically the problem? So the main problem is that we live in this current linear economy. So what does it mean? So first of all, we have largely unsustainable business models that drive fast paces of consumption. So we're expected to consume more and more and more. Also, we see shorter product lifetimes leading to high levels of waste. So across the board, products from washing machines to phones, even the clothes that we wear, we see product lifetimes decreasing across the board. And this also doesn't lead to only ecological damage, but also economic damage. So we see a loss of value embedded in the products and also the materials. So some of the causes, you see some pictures here. Basically, we want volume over value. Those are actually the unsustainable business models that we're used to. We're used to discounting, bulk buys. One thing that it leads to is, for instance, food waste. 30 to 50% of the still edible food is being wasted due to some of those business models. But also, on the one hand, we have overconsumption. Also, in the last 15 years, we see that clothing production has doubled, and at the same time, the number of wears per item has dropped by almost 40%. So again, this leads to a lot of waste. So during this presentation, already quite a lot of garbage trucks of textiles have either been landfilled or burned, because every second that, on average, happens somewhere in the world. So this is not only happening in food and clothing, but in many sectors that we see across the world. So we need a totally different approach to doing business, and even a totally different economy. So maybe this is a funny one. So we think about unneeded purchases. So a UK survey actually found that 82% of the adults have regretted a purchase in the past. So we see that we buy cheap products, and we see that workers basically work overtime to produce something that we don't even use at all. So what are these things that we basically waste? So things like clothing, so we buy clothing and don't even wear it sometimes. Sports equipment, but also kitchen gadgets. But mainly we regret also buying fast food, but maybe that's more a health thing than an unsustainability thing. So that also leads to waste. And this simple example of the paper cup also shows it. So we source wood from somewhere else in the world, we ship it to another place, we manufacture it into a paper cup, very complex value chain. Someone uses it maybe for 10 to 20 minutes, and then it's disposed of, maybe recycled. So a very complex value chain for a product that we only use for a few minutes. So short lifetimes and high waste. So basically, this is a picture of a value hill. So we created with colleagues of Circle Economy. So basically, we have a complex value chain where we extract resources, manufacture something out of it, sell it at retail, again in a different place, all different places around the world. We continuously add value. We use it maybe once or maybe not at all, and then we destroy that value because we throw it away or burn it. So that's really a waste. So what we need to go to is some economy where we actually retain the value. So rather than throwing it away, we need to find ways to actually look after the products for longer. For instance, through reuse or sharing it with others, maintenance and repair. So there's already a lot of initiatives focused on encouraging that, and maybe also second-hand, third-hand, etc., different types of markets. Because what we see now is some of the negative consequences already of this linear economy. Luckily, this is not the real picture yet. So this is a projection of maybe 2100 when sea levels may have risen because of climate change. So you see that half of the Netherlands will actually be covered in water. Of course, we will be fine in Maastricht, we will be high and dry, but it might be a bit busier with people from the Randstad all moving here and seeking coverage in the hills. So this is not something we want. And in other places in the world, we see that areas are drying up. So this is an example of the Aral Sea. It's not completely a picture because of climate change, but actually because of cotton production. It has been drying up since the 1970s from a sea to basically a little bit of water left, so it's quite drastic consequences. But it's not all doom and gloom. So when you read the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change, there's still hope. So basically we have the technologies there to actually drive action and change for a better climate. So the technologies are there to actually have the emissions by 2030, but this is what we need at minimum to have a safe operating space to live in. So the solution, so I don't only want to talk about doom and gloom, but also about what we could do positively. So the solution could be a circular economy. What is it? Circular economy still supports sustainable development, according to the 2017 article as well, by aiming to secure the resources now for the current generation, but also the future generations that are coming. Because, of course, they also want to live a normal life. So what does it look like? With colleagues, we developed those 4 strategies of a circular economy. So first of all, it's about efficiencies or narrowing the loop. So if we take an example of this glass, maybe use less material to produce the glass. So that's actually in the design phase. We think about the design and using less resources. Then we also need to make sure that this product lasts as long as possible. So that is slowing the loop, but also thinking maybe about consuming less of things. Then closing the loop, so when we've endlessly used something, then there's post-consumer recycling, so then the materials at least can be recovered. And finally, there's regeneration, so improving the natural ecosystems that we live in. Giving you a few examples of that to make it a bit less abstract. So narrowing the loop was about less resources per product. A very easy example could be a lightweight and shared car. So you use less material, it's smaller, it could be suitable for a city center because it's easier to park. You could share it with others. And because it's lighter, it also uses less energy. So it has a lot of positive additional advantages to being light and smaller. An example of closing the loop. So we all know about municipal recycling. We all know and do that properly, hopefully. But you can also think about recycling of bigger products, like these chairs. So it could be enabled by having a single material and also designed for upgrading. So this chair could be easily dismantled, repaired, and maybe also upgraded because it consists of different parts. So in this way, you could actually reuse the material. Slowing the loops is one of my favorite strategies because it's a bit old, but it should actually be coming back because probably most products were designed like that in the 1950s when everything exponentially started going up. But maybe it's a strategy that should come back, really. So already Patagonia in 2011 and the New York Times asked people to maybe buy less or don't buy at all. So this was the advert they did on Black Friday. So Black Friday is usually the day that we should be buying stuff according to businesses. But basically they said exactly the opposite. And some companies followed suit and did similar strategies. Another company is Vitsu. They have more high-end, expensive furniture, but they never do sales, basically. And their motto is living better with less that lasts longer. So they also don't do any sales targets because they believe that they should sell you less rather than more. So it's quite a counter-business, but still very interesting and successful business strategy because they've been growing as a business since. Not only talk about things that we use, but also things we use up. The food equivalent might be slow food. So maybe we should eat less of meat and dairy, but when we eat it of higher quality. So that could be a better but less example in the food industry. And then one that I saw of a famous Dutch chocolate brand, Tony Chocolonely. It was actually on New Year's, but I think it's still a nice example. They basically said, I'm bad for your health. Maybe you should consume less of me. So I think that's quite an interesting example of maybe also considering as a brand to make your customers maybe healthy by considering better but less. Then regeneration. I think regeneration is one of the newest strategies, and I think this is where companies are really struggling because it's not so natural to think about, as a business, about how you regenerate the natural environment unless you're maybe in a farmer and in that particular business. But more and more businesses are thinking about this because it's really a needed strategy when you look at the evidence on climate change. I think a nice example from TU Delft is the ocean cleanup. So Bojan Slat really saw that there was a lot of plastic waste, this plastic soup in the sea, and he thought, I need to do something with this. So he started the ocean cleanup. So it's a non-profit that develops technologies to scale up technologies and remove plastic from the sea. So a recent test actually found that they could actually remove 29 tons of plastic from the sea. There's millions of tons, kilograms of plastic still in the sea, so he has a big job to be done. But he's doing a good job and actually working on it very well. And they scale up as follows. So they collaborate because, of course, they cannot do it alone. They start as a non-profit. So they work with donations as well, but they also sell sunglasses made from the ocean plastic. So that's also a way to basically attract customers and also make them aware of this particular issue. Again, a Patagonia example, but with many things, Patagonia was also at the forefront, so I think it's fair to mention them twice in this presentation. So Patagonia also got into the food business because basically they saw that food is one of the next big things next to the outdoor industry they're in that they could be solving. So they actually started a food business to think about how can we actually change the food system? So together with local governments and also conservationists, they started the initiative to save wild salmon and actually regain wild salmon in rivers. So it's quite radical of a company to think about that and do that as part of your business. So how did they do that? They had many conversations with the local governments and said maybe the dams should be removed, they're old dams, and then the fish can flow again. And as a result, 10,000 of fish and wild salmon have been regained. Of course, it's also good for their business because they use salmon for their food business, but it's a very interesting example of a business working on regeneration. Of course, it's not all perfect yet, so what I see is the circular economy is still very much in its infancy. So Europe is really seen as the leader in terms of recycling as well, but recycling rates are still lower than 50% in Europe across the board. Some countries are a lot worse. Countries like Netherlands and Germany are a bit better, but across the board, only less than 50% of the products are being recycled. So we still have a lot of work to do, even in the field of recycling. Then we see remanufacturing. So remanufacturing is where you can reuse most of the parts of a product, so it doesn't have to be downgraded. And we see that that's less than 2% still in Europe. And we see similar numbers also in the US. So again, there's a lot of work to do. In industries where you have high value materials like aerospace and the automotive industry, we see that the percentages are higher. But in general, consumer products, it could be a lot higher, as you can see. And finally, repair. This is something we all probably experienced. All of us have had a product that we couldn't probably repair, although we wanted to. So 77% of Europeans actually want to repair their products, but it's often not possible or too expensive to them. So this is also something that is changing, but it's also changing through the circular economy package in Europe, but a little bit too slow still. So what we see is also that there's a business focus on innovations that save costs and efficiencies, and also recycling, and also slowing the loop and this regeneration strategy, although they're very important, are still lagging behind a little bit. So the future, I think we need to think about a positive future as well, because this is what we want. So we need to move from challenges to solutions. So very easy, the challenges are as follows. We don't do enough, and what we do might not be good enough. So there might be two simple solutions to that. So first of all, we might have to experiment more and do more and try new things, just like Bojan did with his new technology in the oceans, and he's now working on river plastic as well. And also we need to focus more on sufficiency and slowing the loop, as well as regeneration. So in my research, as Peter also said, I focus on experimentation, and specifically with circular service business models. You might think, what are they? So, for instance, you have Bugaboo, so a company that we worked with in a previous project. So rather than selling a stroller, they have a lease and subscription service to it, because you only need it for a short period. So why would you buy it for 8 years? So this is one example of a service model. Another example is Swap Feeds. They started as a quite scaled model, but they also look after the repair and maintenance, of course, for you. Higlo is an example of a platform where you can rent instead of buy something from others. So this is also an example of maybe reducing the total stuff that we own. And finally, of course, I want to mention Homey. So it's a business that I co-founded. I see people smiling in the back. So basically, we're trialing different types of business models that hopefully also lower the footprint on the environment. But what is the theory behind this? So why would we experiment with circular service business models? So building on the work by Arnold Tucker, already in 2004, he said we could have a 90% reduction in environmental impact compared to just selling a product. This is quite radical. I have seen maybe one study that came close to that 90%, but there's still a lot of work to be done since this conceptual study that was done in 2004. Why would it be better to have a service business model? Well, the customer receives the outcome, like for instance, clean laundry, that could be a good thing, but the service provider can decide on the whole service behind it, so they can optimize it and lower the cost and also lower the resource inputs needed. Also, when you as a service provider, like Swap Feeds for instance, hold ownership of a product, you want to make it last as long as possible, because that will save you money. And finally, also when you, for instance, have a service like a car sharing service and you pay for the fuel of it, of course you want your car to be as fuel efficient because it also saves you costs. So a lot of benefits come together in those service business models. But what we see is that corporations really still lag behind. So there's not so many business models yet, although we see that a lot of experimentation is happening. But yeah, also the transition takes time. So it's not that overnight a company can change from one linear to a circular model. And I will give you one example of that. So during the pandemic, of course, you have time to do desk research, so plow through corporate reports to basically see what businesses are doing. So this is an example of H&M. Everyone will know the clothing retailer, I guess. And what you can see is that in the beginning, in 2010, when they looked at circular innovations, they very much looked into replacing materials with recycled content and creating a conscious collection that is slightly better for the environment. But only as of 2018, they started things like rental services, vintage, secondhand and subscription, and also occasional wear. So if you need something for a short period, then you could maybe rent it for that period. They're very much trialing those business models, very much in Sweden, some in other countries. But of course, when you walk into the regular H&M store, you see much of the linear model still and less of this. So there's still a lot of work to be done to move from this linear to a circular model, but they're working hard on it. This is not one example. You see many companies that have similar trajectories where since around 2017, 2018, they started trialing some of those new business models. So this is this circular business model experimentation space where they're checking and seeing what they could do to actually reduce the environmental impact of the stuff they sell. So a definition, so experimentation is quite iterative to develop new value propositions, so new things to you as a customer. And it's also about finding out what is desirable to us as individual customers, but also what is feasible and viable, financially viable for the business to do. And you need to find that out through trial and error. And also, of course, it has to be more circular, so better from an environmental perspective. And after all those iterations, you can do a more complex pilot. So you often start with smaller pilots before you do this. And the idea is also that through experimentation, you also support a larger transition. You transform consumer behavior as well, so it becomes more normal to have maybe second-hand or a used product, and we know better how to recycle or look after our stuff. So basically, you also try to create new behaviors. These are 3 examples of experiments I've been involved in myself. So the first example is an in-shop experiment with retailer Marks & Spencer's in the UK. So basically, in their business, they wanted to investigate how they could create a circular model. And we said we should go for the most difficult ones, for the slowing the loop examples and not for recycling, because we think that you can do recycling yourselves. So basically, we investigated how we could actually convince or work with the customer to create more of an intention to also look after clothes for longer. And we set up a lab in the store so people could learn how to sew again. And it was very popular, so people came in, they said, I don't even know how to sew on a button anymore. And it was very interesting that, and also exciting for the company itself. And it was then rolled out actually in 10 different stores, so it became very popular. Second one is an online experiment, so together with Inaugural, so it's a company that we also work with in Circular X. We did a project called the Circular Business Project that started in 2016. This is an example of mud jeans where we trialed, it's called an A-B split test. So you have 2 different versions of an advertisement to see which one works best to convince people to have a more sustainable lifestyle. And we found out through the number of clicks which one was better. And finally, the example of Homey. So I also wanted to mention that and also show you the example of how we started experimenting towards a circular business. So this is a picture of Homey and the new bright colors. So it's a case study of a company that is born circular. It's a case of circular business model experimentation. So what is it? So it's a pay-per-use business model. So everything like installation, repair, and removal are included in the price. We have a tracking device, basically, and that tracks how people use the equipment. And we also have differential pricing. Sounds more difficult than it is, to actually stimulate energy efficiency. So this is what it looked like in the experiment. So a cold wash is much cheaper than a 90-degree wash. So you get a machine for free, but you only start paying per use. And also you have an eco button. If you use that, you even save more money. So recent prices are on that, but this is what we used for the experiment. So what we see is, of course, we also used marketing in combination with experimentation. So month 0 is actually the month where we gave people a free month. This is a good way to attract customers, but also a good way to see how much people would wash if it would be for free. So you see that people wash a lot more and at higher temperatures than after month 1. Because after month 1, when they start paying, they suddenly realize, ooh, I have to pay per use, so they become much more conscious. And also through more anecdotal evidence from these people, we also noticed that they also became more conscious about other behaviors they had in home. So on average, those types of customers saved about 25% on their environmental footprint for washing. So it's quite a significant impact. And we're redoing the study now with more recent data, but this is the data when we first started as an organization. But of course, I also talked about viability, feasibility, and also the future. So what we're doing at the moment as an organization, so it's actually looking into new propositions. So also subscription models, perhaps, because I couldn't think about a pay-per-use business model, for instance, for a fridge. That could be otherwise a dietary option where you cannot open the fridge. So we're looking into new propositions and experiments to make something that's also better for the customer as well. Next to experimentation, we need less and more. So to me, circular economy is also a story of less and more. And I will explain you a little bit what I mean. So less, because we live on a finite planet. So it's a very simple story. We also need to consider how much we consume in total. What does less mean in a business context? Can it even mean something? So recently, actually last month, or actually this month, we completed a study with Laura Niesen and also Sam Short, and we investigated this idea of a sufficiency-based circular economy. So it's more circular economy plus, circular economy where people get more conscious about how much they consume. So of course, a certain amount of consumption is still needed, but we need to question how, and also how much we consume. So, and I personally think that it could also be enabled by business. For instance, through longer lasting products, maybe you have to charge more for that, but then it will also last longer and you have a better warranty on it. Second-hand marketplaces, also designing for multiple life cycles, maybe also frugal innovations we implement now in developing countries, but why should we have such complex innovations here? Maybe you could also have less complex, less resource-intensive innovations here, and not only in emerging countries. Sharing could work, sharing clothes, cars, etc. is becoming more common, but also alternatives to materialistic consumption. So maybe you don't need to be consuming stuff to be happy. There's ample evidence for that. So this is something that is work to be done. So what we see is still that those approaches to sufficiency are lagging behind. So with Laura, we looked into very much detail of what companies who say they pursue sufficiency are actually doing. So we found 150 businesses that use sufficiency type of language in their websites, for instance, and their communications. But we found that it's often mainly green alternatives, so eco-friendly products. So only 22 firms really said, maybe we should consume less, but it's already better than only Patagonia in 2011. And also some are talking about moderating sales, so maybe discouraging total number of purchases and also avoiding discounting. So there is evidence, but still some work to do. So here you see the top bar is basically the green alternative, which is the most popular category among businesses. Next to less, we also need more. So what do I mean by more? So we need regeneration. So we need regeneration because significant environmental damage has already been done. This is just by clicking on environmental damage in Google Images. It was a long list of pictures, unfortunately, but that's why we need to do work on regeneration in addition to those other strategies. So what do I mean with that in a business context? So for a business, it's of course also very important to do regeneration, not only when you're a farmer, because it's about securing the future resource supply you have. Also Unilever, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, big businesses are dependent on those resources. So the questions you should be asking as a company is, how can we do more good rather than less bad? This is also what was mentioned in the Net Positive book by Pullman and also Andrew Winston. So it's a recent book that just came out this year. So it's a very relevant question, I think. Also ask yourself, is the world a better place because your business is in it? I think that's also a very nice question to be asking. And how can we collaborate with others to achieve our goals? Because as a business, you're not necessarily in the conservation business, so you would have to work with many others to achieve your goals. So these are the outer rings of the picture of the, beyond just circular, we should be more regenerative as well. So what else could we do? It never stops. So I'll also ask something from you as well. So what else could we do for a successful circular economy? Also, I think individual citizenship and personal responsibility is very important. So how we live, how we move around and travel, what we buy, what we eat, that really matters. So it's not nothing, it does matter how we do this. But also policy interventions. We need to make sure that the products we have those spare parts, that they can be maintained, repaired, etc. That they have those long warranties and not just 2 years. So there's also a policy responsibility. Also the business models, those ones are focused on volume over value. It needs to be turned around. It needs to be value over volume. How can policy do something about this? Already in France, you can see that there's a law against planned or built-in obsolescence. So the country of France already sued Apple for this. So I think they did it successfully. So more of this will follow probably also in the circular economy package that is being developed at the moment in Europe. And also collaboration. We need to collaborate because the issues go far beyond the company boundaries. Now the recap, so the problem is that we have this dominant linear economy. The solution is this circular economy. I still believe this is the case, but of course it's still very nascent and we're not there yet, so we need more experimentation towards new models. And the future for me is about less and more, sufficiency and regeneration. And I also always want to end up on a positive note. People know this, who have seen me present before, but I truly believe in this statement. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. Thank you for your attention. Ik heb gezegd.
Dear Professor Bocken, thank you very much for a very, very inspiring inaugural speech. I've taken a lot of notes. It's an area that is close to my heart anyway, and I think, you know, I realized also on a very personal level I could relate to the problem that was just up there. And let me just give you an example of this. As some of you may know, I'm moving, so I've sadly had to be, well, first of all, I'm sadly leaving this fine university and the School of Business and Economics, but I'm also leaving Maastricht and therefore my apartment. And so I've had to get rid of some stuff, and I've really tried to recycle most of it, and I've been fairly successful. But I think what you also point to here is waste is not waste anymore. Waste is a resource, right? And yet when I drive to the Milieupark Randwijk, which is the local dump, they fail to see it that way. So I come there and with all my resources and tell them, here you have my valuable waste. And they say, then they want to charge me for that, right? And I think, don't they realize that this is valuable? They should, and I have that negotiation with them. I can tell you that's a very linear kind of thinking that they have. Anyway, I've also seen that, I liked very much your discussion of the future. On experimentation, I think we really, really need that. I think we also need, once we have experimented, ways to scale it up. And I think that's also one area in which your research will also connect with other parts of the school. That is, once we have found a good way of doing it, how do we take the H&M or swap feeds and scale it to sufficient level? That would also be important for the impact on the world. But I also was inspired by the regeneration. I think what you also need is a regenerative leadership. And there is actually a small literature on that out there. And of course, it also has to do with your person as a leader. And I think you are exemplary also in that. But I think it is something where we should also think about leadership in a holistic way. And I think that's also something that you can bring to the School of Business and Economics, other than what you already do. And last, but not least, I think I was hugely inspired also by what you when you talked about less and more, and you said what we also need to do is to ask of companies, are you actually doing good to this world and not just being less bad? And I think that's where 20 years ago, the whole discussion was about minimizing the harm you did, but now it's about how do you solve problems for society, how do you solve problems for stakeholders. And I think that is basically connecting in an extremely nice way with the literature on purpose of businesses. And I think that's also where you connect extremely well with the School of Business and Economics, but also with Maastricht University in general. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank, first of all, Professor Dr. Bocken for a fantastic and very inspiring inaugural. And I think we now need to get to cooler areas, ideally, and there will be drinks served outside here in just a second. I hereby close this academic ceremony.